Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cache Variety Show, where we deliver a platter of funky little Aotearoa sporting notes. Yesterday, we recorded a big old Patreon podcast. We got pretty damn funky, if I may say so myself, talking deep about spin bowling and the Women's World Cup and some Plunkett Shield action as well. So if you are a member of the Patreon whānau supporting the Niche Cache and our content, do check that out. Every Monday, there is a Patreon podcast there waiting for you. And if you do want to support the Niche Cache on our mission to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence and just celebrate all things Aotearoa every day, join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/EL Niche Cache, our Niche Cache. Patreon.com/our Niche Cache. You support us, we deliver an extra podcast, and it's just a great way to support us as we endeavor to fulfill our mission. Every Monday and Friday afternoon or evening, we deliver our email banger as well via Substack. Sign up at thenichecache.substack.com, enter your email address in, and then you just get all the Niche Cache content straight to your email inbox on a Monday and Friday evening, as well as extra yarns, bonus yarns. You get the links to the content, you get the links to the podcast, and every Monday and Friday extra yarns. So apparently today is International Wahine Day, Women's Day, and that's fantastic. Celebration of everyone is what we should be doing, really, without a specific day to do it. We should love everyone and just enjoy each other's company without having to put things on a pedestal. But whatever the fuck, we do have to put things on a pedestal. And the reason I bring this up, Wildcard, is because yesterday, what did I write about? I just wrote about Lydia Ko, NRL Women's and Women's World Cup notes as well. So it's just three major women's sporting topics related to Aotearoa. And that's what we do at the fucking Niche Cache. We just present all Aotearoa sporting goodness that we are interested in on the same platter. And those are extra things that you can expect in our twice weekly email dispatch. And of course, writing about all things Aotearoa sport at the niche-cache.com, in-depth yarns, analysis, opinion, and just beautiful Aotearoa sporting content. It's multiple ways. It's podcast, it's video, it's written, it's email, it's whatever the fuck you want it, however you want it, apart from like super short attention span type of shit. You know, we're old souls. You know, we're keeping it real, we're keeping it underground, fresh and funky. We don't follow the trends. We challenge ourselves to be better, and hopefully we can inspire you and challenge you to be better and actually learn about something, read about something, listen to a long conversation, as opposed to just fucking scrolling on your phone. Maybe just throw your phone away and move on. Fantastic intro there, Wildcat. Yeah, we usually start with mindfulness, and I think it's a good little segue there. Flush your phone down the dunny and take some mindfulness on board.
Apart from the fact that I've got to read my mindfulness off my phone where I saved it, but yeah.
But you can reach back down in the dunny and pull it out, you know, it's two-way.
Yeah, well, we'll put a glove on or something first. This is a slightly different to how we normally do this, because I haven't gone with the pithy little one-liner kind of thing. I got a paragraph here, but A, it's from Ram Dass, so it's worthwhile, and B, sort of explains itself, which saves some time in the aftermath as well. So this is a quote from Ram Dass. He says, when you go out into the woods and you look at trees, you see all these different trees, and some of them are bent, and some of them are straight, and some of them are evergreens, and some of them are whatever. And you look at the tree and you allow it, you appreciate it, you see why it is the way that it is. You sort of understand that it didn't get enough light, and so it turned that way. And you don't get all emotional about it. You just allow it. You appreciate the tree. The minute you get near humans, you lose all of that. And you're constantly saying, you're to this, or I'm to this. That judging mind comes in. And so I practice turning people into trees, which means appreciating them just the way they are.
I was a bit scared when you said that you're not going to deliver a one line, you're going to deliver a paragraph, because I struggle to ground the mindfulness and relate it and break it down as we discuss every week. I do my best, but it's a hard task to do it on the fly and freestyle it. So I'm glad that that paragraph just explained everything nicely. It wrapped it all up, and just to interpret it for the point of this, definitely got to let go of that, some of that shit. Like, even just with yourself, you got to let go of like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, should be this, should be that, not doing this, am doing that. Maybe I'm just a tree, and I am exactly how Papatūānuku, Ranganui, Mother Earth, all the beings and entities have created me to be in this moment. I'm just like a tree. I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to do, as are the other people that you meet. And we all judge. We're all great at judgment, but that's an area we can improve on.
Yeah. You can see why I needed to do the full paragraph, because like the main line is the idea of turning people into trees, but it doesn't make any sense unless you explain the concept behind it. But it explains itself nicely. Treat people like trees. Look at them the way that they are. Understand that they are that way because of a variety of factors. Many of them not their fault, just like environmental things. And also, equally as importantly as why they are the way they are is the fact that it's not your job to change them, and you couldn't if you tried. And so acceptance of people around us, and as you sort of took it to the next level as well, acceptance of ourselves, and not just going around the place looking at other people and wondering, what do they think of me? I don't like the way I'm presenting myself in this scenario, or when in actual fact, everyone else is thinking the same thing about themselves compared to everyone else around them as well. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, just as you're thinking about yourself, thinking they're thinking about you, which they're not. Managed to get that out without like a tongue twister. So I'm pretty proud of myself for that. I should probably leave the sentence where it is now.
Yeah, kaha. Just to take the thought a step further, what is below the surface with trees?
The roots.
The roots. And so how, like, this is where judgment becomes incredibly fraught, I think is the correct word, flawed as well.
Yep.
Those roots run deep into the earth, depending on the size of the tree. And those roots could be the trauma and circumstance of that person's parents and their parents and their parents and their parents and their ancestral line. So how can you judge a tree when you can't see the roots? How can you judge a person when you can't see the roots beneath the surface that have created a circumstance for them to be doing whatever the fuck is pissing you off? Like, every person has roots that run deep into the earth that have impacted who they are in this moment. And we don't know what those roots are. So why would I judge someone on those roots, which is manifested in the tree growing above the ground?
Yeah. And then also, I guess, like, when you look at a tree within a forest, the ways in which that tree differs from other trees are less consequential when they're surrounded by like hundreds of other trees. It all becomes, it's very easy to, there's that saying, isn't there, about like seeing the forest through the trees, seeing the bigger picture, the larger sort of environment there. And when you see that tree as one sort of player in a larger play, one aspect of a greater forest, suddenly the ways in which that tree, is different from others just don't matter so much, because every tree is different in their own little way, right?
You've actually sparked a different mindfulness nugget that I have thought about before. And I think, when I think about the stuff, I think, is this worthy of hijacking the Wildcards mindfulness? And then I'll stash it away. But the forest and the trees, there is a long-tailed little thing. A different one, but equally as interesting, is, can you see the fruit from the leaves? Because if you go into any orchard, or you go into any little forest that's growing fruit, or like plant, or like vegetables, can you see the fruit from the leaves? Which is the same thing as seeing the tree in the forest and the forest and the trees. because quite often the fruit is disguised by the leaves that overhang it, that hide it from predators or whatever it is. So it's just a different way of flipping that. Can you see the fruit from the leaves? Because the fruit is incredibly like abundant and beautiful, nourishing, where the leaves are just fucking leaves that I'm trying not to judge because it's a tree and I'm learning and I'm growing, Shoshin mindset. But I think it's an interesting way of flipping the forest and the trees is, can you see the fruit from the leaves?
Yeah, and it does go both ways too, because there's the ways in which the fruit is hidden, as you say, for evolutionary reasons. The tree has to grow in this way. Like, the thing that comes to mind is I don't know if you've seen like chestnut trees, and the chestnuts grow in these little like pods, which look like porcupines. They're like super sharp, just spikes all over them, kind of thing, to keep the birds from eating them, right? But then as they get older and like ripe, they fall off the tree, they split open, and then you can just like pluck the little chestnuts out from inside the pods. There's examples like that where you miss the sweet fruity bit because you're distracted by like the rest of the plant. But there's also ways in which you might like grow past, what's an example, like an orange tree or something, bright orange things hanging off it, and that's all you see, and you miss the tree, and you miss the fact that those oranges don't exist without everything, like the ingredients that are fed to it through the tree itself. Like it's not one or the other. They're literally like intertwined and part of the same. They're the same thing. The orange fruit is the orange tree. It's where the seeds for the next tree comes from, etc., etc.
Cowabunga. Let's get into some sporting stuff here, Wildcard. I'm doubling down on a hot take in our first segment. What are you going to do?
What am I going to do? I'm going to roll through some ideas about the New Zealand Breakers. Might as well crack into it, I suppose, eh? Like, this isn't quite a poem, but I sort of started writing it as a poem, and then just it became its own thing. But the Breakers are 4-13 this season. The Breakers have not won consecutive games all season. The Breakers have never made the playoffs under the current ownership. The Breakers are 43-66 since the current ownership came in. The Breakers have not re-signed a single import under the current ownership. The Breakers have a general manager, but everybody knows that the CEO is actually the one calling all the basketball shots. The owner and the like dude making the basketball plays, the same guy. The Breakers, on that topic, have re-signed their coach twice in 3 years despite all of this. The Breakers, sure, are stuck away from home and family and have been for pretty much 2 seasons, but that doesn't seem to be as much of an issue for the Wellington Phoenix currently as it is for the Breakers. The Breakers' dismantling of a perennial championship contender that they once were has got to be one of the worst cases of mismanagement that we have seen in Kiwi sports in a long time, and I continually stunned that it does not get more focus.
Take number 1, fuck the Breakers. Take number 2, Glenn Phillips is definitely the funkiest Aotearoa cricket currently in circulation. I introduced that idea and wrote about it on the 17th of February. And since then, Glenn Phillips has played 6 games of cricket. He has taken a wicket in all 6 games and all 7 innings bowled. So anytime Glenn Phillips bowls, he takes a wicket. And he has scores of 45, 122, 68, 5, 23, 1, and 57 not out, which is, a bit ho-hum, all good. But when you come over to his strike rates, Plunkett Shield strike rate, 213 runs at a strike rate of 138. Remember, 4-day cricket, you're probably thinking of a strike rate, maybe 60. Maybe Black Caps coming back into Plunkett Shield, 80, 90. Glenn Phillips is just tonking it everywhere in the Plunkett Shield, and his Plunkett Shield strike rate is higher than his Ford Trophy strike rate of 110. Obviously, Super Smash, he's gone in at 146 strike rate. So I made the statement Glenn Phillips was Aotearoa's funkiest cricketer on February 17th. We are now on March 8th, and I'm doubling down. I'm going to add a super in there. He's not the most funky cricketer in Aotearoa. He is the super funkiest cricketer in Aotearoa, if you catch my drift. So shout out to Glenn Phillips. Like, he's just playing cricket in a funky fashion. And off the top of my head, the only other cricketer that comes to mind about funk and just like entertainment and like, holy shit, I need to watch this dude play cricket is Finn Allen. But Finn Allen doesn't do anything in the Plunkett Shield. So you can't be the funkiest cricketer in Aotearoa if you're just playing white ball cricket, and scoring runs in the white ball stuff. Glenn Phillips does it all in any format. And now he's doing his bowling thing in any format, and he's super motherfucking funky. So shout out to Glenn Phillips. Statistical vitamins whipped up in a blender here. Wildcard, what do you got?
Yeah, Glenn Phillips also a gun in the field as well. Is literally never out of the action whenever he plays. Although I think the bit that strikes me the most, that continually like catches my attention, is the wicket taking, who he just keeps popping up with a wicket in every single game that he plays in. Especially because how cool is it to see spin bowlers taking wickets, especially in this country? Which leads me into my vitamin stat, which is an RIP Warne stat today, but with a Kiwi twist, of course, because while it's always the Ashes Test matches against England that people, including Shane Warne himself, would always talk about, old SK Warne always, caused untold carnage whenever he played against the Black Caps. 195 of his 708 Test wickets came against England, which is fair enough because he played them 36 times more than anyone else. But against New Zealand, 103 wickets at 24.37 average, 56 strike rate. That right there is more wickets against the Black Caps than any other bowler has ever taken in Test cricket history. And second place isn't even close. Second place is Murali with 82 wickets, 21 behind. To be fair to Murali, because it's very hard to split Warne and Murali. That was just, intertwined throughout their whole career. To be fair to Matai Muralitharan, he did that at a better average in 6 fewer matches than Warne. But 21 wicket lead is pretty extensive from Warne. Also in the top 10 for wickets taken against New Zealand, Stuart Broad is third, 72 wickets at 27.33. Waqar Younis, 70 at 19.6. Dale Steyn, 68 at 16.04. I remember a certain 45 all out that Dale Steyn was a prime contributor towards. Ravi Ashwin, 66 wickets at 15.43 in only 9 matches, which is nuts. Ian Botham, 64 at 23.43. Jimmy Anderson, 63 at 28.82. A lot of Englishmen on this list. Wasim Akram, 69 at, 60 at 17.01. And then Bob Willis, also 60 at 18.86. Warne split those wickets pretty evenly. 54 of them were against New Zealand and Australia. 49 were against New Zealand and Aotearoa. How many spinners have taken more wickets, more than 49 wickets in Test matches in Aotearoa, including New Zealand spinners? One. Daniel Vettori. He's the only one. Shane Warne has taken more wickets in New Zealand than any other New Zealand spinner, except for Daniel Vettori and except for Deepak Patel, who's tied on 49 wickets as well. But Deepak Patel had an average over 40. Shane Warne's average in New Zealand was like 21. Statistical slaughter there. And that's without even getting to his 99 against the Black Caps, highest ever Test score for Warne, the only player in history with 3,000 runs and no Test centuries. All the time that Craig McMillan batted sideways against him, all the way that Shane Warne took revenge on him later in his life by stealing his cheese cutter hat fashion. But those are all tales for another day. Today's tale is Shane Warne 103 wickets against New Zealand, 21 more than any other bowler in history did.
Big up to Aotearoa's best spinner, Shane Warne.
Yeah. After Dan Vettori, of course.
My statistical vitamin here, wildcard, is not a statistic. It is a statistic I would like to see. And like, we deal a lot in statistics. We use statistics to help portray our ideas, our narratives, and reinforce what we're talking about. But statistics, we choose those. Like, there is a balance between our own intuition and statistics. We're very cognizant of the value and the ceiling of statistics. Part of that, for me personally, wildcard, is I don't care too much about super analytical statistics, because I think the basic statistics do the best job of telling us what we need to know. And then you incorporate those basic statistics that every sport has pretty well sorted. You take those basic statistics and you combine them with intuition, vibe, and interpretation for the whole niche cage picture. This statistic would be a bit analytically, but that is also to say NRL statistics are pretty low on the agenda. And by that, I mean, there is no official record of like meters per run, which seems like the most important statistic, because if you're running for 200 meters from 30 runs, you're not very efficient. But if you're doing Jason Taumalolo with 200 meters from 15 runs, then you're a South Auckland rhinoceros and you're a beast. So if you're doing 100 meters off 20 runs, okay, you're trying hard, but you're not really doing too much. If you get 100 meters off 10 runs, you're making 10 meters with every run. And I have to do that myself. I have to go in and do a bit of mathematics. The NRL doesn't present that. So that is just to say that the NRL has a long way to go. And that's not even the statistic I want included. Because the next step of that is post-contact meters. And we get post-contact meters, just pure numbers. There is no post-contact meters per run. So we would expect the best NRL forwards to have 5 or 6 post-contact meters per run. But again, we only get their total number of post-contact meters, and then it's up to the individual to do a simple division, post-contact meters divided by runs. The statistic I'm thinking about wildcard, it can be applied to rugby union or rugby league, and that is a defensive version of post-contact meters. So if you make a tackle and you get driven backwards as the tackler, you have done a shit job tackling, right? It's either you make a tackle and you sit the ball runner on their ass, men or women, same idea applies here, because I actually thought of this during NRL women. If you're a tackler and you drive them back and you sit them on their ass and you get a slow play the ball, or in rugby union to get a turnover, that's a really good defensive effort. But if you make a tackle and you make contact and then you get driven back, I mean, kia kaha for making the tackle, but you just got driven back 10 meters. So I'd like to see some kind of defensive post-contact meters where the best defenders maybe only concede 1 or 2 meters on average per tackle. And yeah, you might see in the NRL, a half has a really good tackling efficiency number because they make their tackles, but every tackle they concede 5 to 6 meters after contact. So that's not a great defensive system. And that is the statistic I would like to see, is a defensive version of post-contact meters, which I don't have a name for. I think defensive post-contact meters is a simple premise that we can have a brainstorm for the right name. But I think it is an interesting idea to keep an eye on, and you can kind of just keep track of it with your eye test, your intuition, and your interpretation of the footy. So when you're watching a Super Rugby game and you're watching Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, don't know how many games he's going to play over the next few weeks, or what's happening there. But if you're watching and you're trying to learn about Roger Tuivasa-Sheck as a defender, what happens every time he makes a tackle? Does he stop the attacker right there, or does he get driven back? In the NRL, where dudes are running it straight more, easy to see there. And you also got like halves. You can catch a half who might be making all their tackles, but they're getting driven back on every tackle as well. So they'll just chuck that out there. The defensive post-contact meter stat, one to keep an eye on. Let's go deep into the mangroves here, wildcard. I don't even know what is happening with the Chatham Cup, but apparently there was some Chatham Cup thing happening that you would like to discuss.
Yeah, just the cheeky final on the weekend, which if you forgotten about it and didn't realize it was happening, absolutely no surprises because it was a much delayed thing. Extremely weird because like normally the Chatham Cup would be the culmination of the winter season, so you'd have it in like what would we be talking about here, like September, October sort of range. The end of the winter season, and then it would then lead to like the start of the National League season. Now, the way things currently are for both finalists actually were in the last National League, so there you go. But because of COVID postponements on top of COVID postponements on top of COVID postponements, we didn't end up having the final until last weekend in the middle of preseason for the next season. So the 2021 Chatham Cup final happened after 2022 preseason had already begun. So Kashmir Tech, who won the final, they won their semi-final back in early October. They beat Western Suburbs 1-0. And it was 4 months before they even found out who they'd play, because North Shore were meant to be playing Miramar Rangers, the other two semi-finalists, but because of like Auckland lockdowns and etc., North Shore just kept on not being able to play that game until it got to the stage like about a month ago where North Shore just plain had to withdraw. So Miramar got the walkover into the final. Thus, we ended up with this prestigious 99-year-old cup competition playing its final with the teams in preseason mode, and as a result, the game kind of sucked. Like it wasn't a great spectacle. Miramar have seen keeper Zach Jones and also their MVP Ollie White both move on to overseas opportunities since the South Central series, and I think Andy Bevan was missing from this game as well. Coach Scotty Hales mentioned they had a couple like COVID cases when people weren't able to play, so not at full strength, whereas Kashi Tech were pretty much like all guys who were starring for them during the National League season. And it showed. Like they were the better team, created better chances, bit of a dodgy penalty late in the first half, but to take the lead. But on the balance of it, like they were definitely worth that goal, and it was coming one way or another. Rangers picked it up in the second half, a lot better, but a couple blunders by their replacement keeper doomed them, and even a Finn O'Brien stunner and then an extremely odd own goal, which almost gave them a chance. Wasn't enough because Yuya Taguchi then killed it off with a late second. Garvin Coughlin also with 2 goals. A 4-2 win for Kashmir Tech. So Taguchi won the Jack Batty Memorial Medal for the player of the game. He was coincidentally the second Japanese player to win it in a row, because Shogoto won it with Napier City Rovers in 2019. There was no Chatham Cup in 2020, of course, because of COVID. So this was Kashmir Tech's 3rd Chatham Cup in 9 years, which is crazy considering they only formed as a merger club about a dozen years ago or so. They are the only South Island team to have won it this millennium. You have to go back to Dunedin Technical in 1999 for the next. And if you thought that was strange with the Chatham Cup coming, like the Chatham Cup final coming this late after the end of the last winter season, then spare a thought for the ladies in the Kate Shepherd Cup final, which is hopefully going to be played next weekend. Wellington United beat Eastern Suburbs 1-0 on Saturday to join Hamilton Wanderers, who back in February won 3-1 against Coastal Spirit in the grand final. First grand final for either of those clubs in the KSC. So yeah, it was Chatham Cup exploits there, but also Kate Shepherd Cup exploits, which still haven't even happened. So the context of the Chatham Cup stuff, now how weird that was to have it so late, is that the women's final was still a week away.
Moldy order. I'm going deep into the White Ferns World Cup Mangroves here wildcard, just to touch base, because they have played 2 games, and their next game is on Thursday against India, Sunday against Australia, and they're on a Thursday-Sunday rotation. So the week after that, Thursday versus South Africa, Sunday versus England. And as we all know, they've played 2 games. They lost to the West Indies in game 1, and then they defeated Bangladesh yesterday in Dunedin. Bit of a weird game, plenty of rain, 27 overs, and hard to really take too much away from that game. It's a game they should have always won, and they won emphatically, I think, kind of helped by the conditions, but good for them to bounce back after a very disappointing loss to the West Indies in game 1. Susie Bates had a nice score on her home patch in Dunedin. And I'd say Susie Bates is definitely my favorite White Fern. So I was chuffed to be watching her smack boundaries. And when I think about the White Ferns batting, it's very powerful, which I think is going to be something helping them throughout the World Cup, is that they can play big shots in front of the wicket, down the ground, through the covers. Susie Bates can play cut shots for 4, pull shots for 4. All these batters are very powerful 360, which includes laps and sweeps. Katie Martin was quite effective in that fashion as well against West Indies. And that is something that puts the White Ferns immediately among the better teams. Like most teams can do this, but there are some teams I was watching, like Bangladesh, for example, just don't have the power to hit bowling down the ground. Like they were charging some of the bowlers, some of the spinners from the White Ferns, but I don't know what the point of charging is when you can't like hit a 6 or a 4 down the ground. And for those players, the thing I'm keeping an eye on is their innovation playing behind the wicket, because there's a lot of these games, there's no fine leg. And I find that interesting because if you're one of the many players in this World Cup, like it's just a different game to men's cricket, so it's not a negative, but if you're one of the many players in this World Cup who can't smack boundaries down the ground, what's your best option? Smacking boundaries behind you, because that's where a massive like pocket of spaces in the field, as well as it's your best skill set. But didn't see a lot of that. So it's just something to keep an eye on. But the White Ferns do have batters who can hit down the ground as well as being innovative in hitting the spaces behind them. Bowling wise, I am intrigued. Is probably the best way to say it, Wildcard. I think the batting unit, well, apart from Bates, Devine, Kerr, Martin, Satterthwaite scoring the most runs, which is good. It also, like, I thought we were meant to be getting team-wide performances, so it's something to keep an eye on. Like, the best batters are still scoring the most runs, which is fine. Just don't portray it a different way. As we know, there are some dubious tales coming out of the White Ferns decision makers. Bowling, on the other hand, is a little bit more interesting, and I'm curious to see how it develops against some of these better teams. India on Thursday, and then Australia on Sunday. Satterthwaite has 3 wickets. Leah Tahuhu has 3 wickets. They are the best bowlers so far. Amelia Kerr has bowled the most overs, 16 overs, and she's got 1 wicket and an average of 61. So Amelia Kerr is kind of the best bowler for the White Ferns, depending if you ask me or not, but many view her as the best bowler. But there is this trend that she is not taking big wickets in ODI cricket. She's not taking 2 wickets, 3 wickets, 4 wickets, 2 wickets, 2 wickets, 3 wickets. Amelia Kerr takes 1 wicket, and then she might take another wicket. Is very economical, but that is because other batters, opposition teams, are kind of chilling with her and allowing her to dot them up and attack other bowlers. Frances Mackay came into the team to face Bangladesh after Fran Jonas looked a bit out of her depth bowling to the West Indies, and that's cool. Don't mind that. Jess Kerr and Leah Tahuhu have the potential to be one of the best new ball bowling pairs. And when they realized that the pitch was slowing up in Dunedin, Jess Kerr basically turned into a fast Shane Warne, because she was just bowling like leg cutters, and it's very skillful. The Kerr sisters play a lot of indoor cricket, very talented athletes. So not surprised for Jess Kerr to have that skill set, accurately dropping them on a dime as leg cutters. And then we've got another curious thing here from that Bangladesh game. Hannah Rowe batted number 11 and didn't bowl, which I understood because the conditions were more favorable to the slower bowlers. But like, you're just wasting a player. Like, if you're batting someone number 11 and they don't bowl, what's the point? And I don't even know if she fielded a ball in the outfield. So she did bowl versus West Indies, 1 wicket at 5.66 RPO in her 9 overs. And yeah, so I think overall the White Ferns have a very good batting unit that's against. I'm eager to see them face a really good bowling attack and whether they can step up and all chip in, like those 5 top-tier batters, can they all chip in with runs? Or when they face a good bowling attack, is that when they crumble? That's what I'm waiting to see. And then bowling-wise, I don't think the White Ferns have bowled a team out yet. No, 9 wickets versus West Indies, 8 wickets versus Bangladesh. Both games, good effort. 9 wickets, 8 wickets, almost there. But they didn't roll through their opponents. So I'm eager to see which bowler stands up and says, I'm the best bowler for the White Ferns in this World Cup. Rosemary Mayer hasn't played a game. She is a very interesting seamer because she actually nibbles the ball around. And I kind of think she's more useful than Hannah Rowe, but we'll wait and see there. And I think the Kerr sisters are the most important players with the ball. Amelia Kerr, arguably the best batter as well, but the Kerr sisters with the ball is probably where I would look for the most dominant White Ferns bowler and the types of bowlers who can take wickets to chip away at the opposition batting lineup, especially against some of these stronger batting lineups moving forward. So a little bit of an iffy start to the World Cup for the White Ferns. They did win a game they should have won against Bangladesh, and that has evened out things a wee bit. Fascinated to see what happens moving forward against some of the better teams. Question time here, Wildcard. I'm going to come at you. We've got some NRL footy starting this weekend. I don't really talk about the Dragons because why would I? But you are a Dragons fan. So what are you thinking about with the Dragons this season? Are you excited by some of their new signings, some of the young players coming in? What's just your Dragons vibe? Because they definitely are not a Kiwi NRL club of note. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to do my Kiwi NRL coverage with my Kiwi NRL spotlights. Dragons won't pop up too often. They do have Navajo Doyle starting at hooker in their SG ball team from Auckland. Shout out to him. But I won't talk too much about the Dragons from a Kiwi NRL perspective. So the floor is yours as a Dragons fan to lay out some Dragons NRL vibes.
The vibes. I don't know exactly which way I should frame this, because like the thing with them is when you've had enough disappointing seasons in a row, you stop starting a new season with optimism and start starting a new season with pessimism, and it becomes less about like, yeah, this is the year, unless you're just an eternal optimist Warriors fan. It becomes less about that and a little bit more about like, okay, prove me wrong. Show me why you're not going to be in the bottom 4 again this season. Like, are you going to do something good or what? I watched bits and pieces of their trial games, and some of it was decent. Like, I think they've got a couple really good young local guys coming through, and maybe that'll be something that helps them, or maybe it's at least be something that like helps to paper over an average season and see like, well, they're building towards something. There's actually progress going on. Big year for the coach to come in after a disappointing first season to be like to show some of that progress. But on the whole, I can't. The thing with the NRL is it changes so quickly. You never know. Like, a team goes on a good month and then suddenly players who you thought were rubbish, it turns out are actually amazing now. So that sort of thing happens all the time, especially early on in a new season where you don't quite know what to expect. But as it stands, I'm struggling to think of a feasible way in which there'd be a top 8 team, because I just can't see them mustering the consistency that's eluded them for year after year after year after year. So I think the vibes are probably less than ideal right now. But as I say, things change quickly in the NRL. So I think I'll have a better handle on it when like the first actual proper game is played, like after week 1 or 2. There's a couple of like genuine bits of evidence to go on rather than the trial games, which you never quite know. Like, you're never quite sure how much information you should take from those ones versus what you should just disregard because it's not a it's not real footy and everyone's using 20 substitutes and whatever, and no one really cares, and et cetera, et cetera. So right now, more on the negative side than the positive side, but I'm trying not to think about it too much so that I don't have to so that I don't cloud the upcoming season too much before they've had an opportunity to let me down for real. You know what I mean?
Can you, just because what you laid out with Dragons' expectations and they kind of got to earn it, all the things you said there, can you ask me about my Warriors vibes and my Warriors expectations?
All right. How are your Warriors vibes and your Warriors expectations?
The Warriors will be terrible this year. The Warriors will win the wooden spoon. The Warriors will suck. It will be a disastrous year. Everything will be shithouse.
And with that on the record,
With
can only possibly go one way.
Yes, it can only go one way, and that is fantastic. So every year, I think a lot of people, they come in with like, Warriors, this is our year, or they've made a few signings, this is going to be good. There's always some sort of Warriors expectation. And I've just been thinking in my meditations, like, what's if we all just approach this Warriors season as they're going to be shit? And like, the only way is up from there, because no one has ever entered the Warriors season thinking, no, the Warriors are fucked. They're going to be shit. There's always some elevated expectation. And I'm going the other route. Expectations are low. Warriors are going to suck. And what's your other question?
Perspective is a funny thing, eh? But expectations actually has a bit to do with what I want to ask you. Come to think of it, because there are 3 Women's World Cups to be hosted in Aotearoa over the next year and a half. The cricket one's on now. There's a rugby one later in the year. There's a football one in 2023. My question is, bearing in mind the contrasting expectations, so it's not necessarily a level playing field in terms of how far in the literal tournament they go, but which one of those World Cups do you think the New Zealand team will consider the most successful? It's not quite framing that right. Like, which one do you think the New Zealand team will be the most? Which New Zealand team will be the most successful at those 3 World Cups, considering their expectations?
Yeah, relative to the expectations. Look, the Niche Case doesn't know too much about the Black Ferns, but we do know that Aotearoa has high rugby expectations, and I think last year the Black Ferns lost a bunch of games going over to Europe. So it's hard for me on that limited information to suggest that the Black Ferns will be the most successful relative to their expectations, because they have the highest expectations. So there's nothing wrong with them. They just have the highest expectations again, limited information, limited knowledge, don't know if they'll reach those expectations. White Ferns are a bit trickier, because I think they could win this World Cup despite and in spite of other bullshit around the White Ferns. Like, they just might have the best players, and that could be well. But I also think they have high expectations, because all the New Zealand media thinks like the White Ferns were a gambling second favorite based on beating India in a warm-up series. And like, all the information about the White Ferns goes back to the series against India, where it was a warm-up series. So there is this idea that the White Ferns have these high expectations that aren't based on a whole lot. And that is kind of putting me off the White Ferns as well, because I don't think a lot of people are viewing them realistically. I think that people are viewing them through the PR hype lens and what they might wish the White Ferns were, as opposed to what they have actually been. And I think the expectations, there's a big difference in expectations between the White Ferns, Black Ferns, and the Football Ferns. The Football Ferns won't have any expectation. The football people will look at the Football Ferns and be like, oh, they've lost all these games. Like, it's a cute thing that they get to host the World Cup. Again, personally, I have limited Football Ferns knowledge, but in talking to you and learning about the Football Ferns, I think there is a world or a scope in which the Football Ferns, by the time the World Cup comes around, are their best version of themselves. And that, combined with no or minimal expectations, leads me to believe that the football Ferns will be the most successful relative to their expectations. In saying that, I think the Black Ferns, like, they should make the final of their World Cup. And I think there's a world in which the White Ferns make the final of the Women's World Cup as well. And if they're in the final, they might win it. So that might be nice. Bit of a complex question to get through, but yeah, I would say football Ferns.
One thing that the football Ferns have as well is, I think, the benefits of them hosting, or co-hosting in this case, but all their games will be in New Zealand, so it's hosting from their point of view, is bigger than any of the other ones, simply because it means they get to be a top seed when the draw is made, which means they will not be drawn against other top seeds, which means they don't have to play America or England or bloody France or whoever, whoever the top 7 or 8 teams are in the world. They dodge them. They're the worst team in any group that they're picked in. So every team they play is better than them. That won't be the case here. Then conversely, they will get to draw a team from the bottom tier of the seedings, which means a team probably from like Asia, Africa, or South America, just because of the way that women's football has been over the last few years, who they normally wouldn't get to play, but in this case they will, and they'll get at least one evenly matched game. That works out nicely for them.
Musical Jam World Cup. What do you got?
Musical jams. There is a couple new singles by Barty Strange. Got a new single which I quite liked. Band called X Void as well had a great song. But overall, there's a album came out recently by an LA act. I think you'd probably say somewhere between the like indie rock type, garage rock balance. There's just level of production probably is the only difference between those, but somewhere in there called Sasami. She's got a new album called Squeeze. Sasami used to be in a band called Cherry Glazer, who's quite a decent sort of like revivalist rocky group. I like them. They got a song called I think Wasted None a couple years ago. That was awesome. Sasami had left that group by then. She left, and she used to play synths for them. Left in 2018 to pursue a solo career. Put out her first album, I think 2019, and it's kind of like generic-y, not generic, that's unfair. Like there's strong songs, but there wasn't like a sound that set her apart from other people in that kind of realm. The new album called Squeeze definitely has that. Like she's worked with Ty Segall on a couple ones, so there's a couple like really crunchy, like punky kind of thing. She's talked up like a new metal influence. I don't hear Linkin Park at all listening to it, but I do hear like in utero era Nirvana on a couple tracks. And this album is fantastic. I've burned through it several times, and I will say like probably the first album I've heard, like the Kate LeBon album was on the fringes here, but I'll say the Sasami album tips the scales and is the first album I've heard this year, which I would say is genuinely like 10 out of 10 great. Like the first like genius level album I've heard of the year. There's normally only 3 or 4 in any given year. This is the first one that sits in that category for me.
I'm going some Aotearoa hip hop here. We got Sugar James, who, according to his Bandcamp, I think he's from the deep south but moved to Christchurch. He has a track called Just Me, and this is a rather unique style of Aotearoa hip hop because it sounds like it is off the streets of New York in about 1992. And I listen to a lot of like old school hip hop mixes in my morning mahi routine. And if you put Sugar James Just Me in the middle of one of those mixes, which are like 90s underground hip hop mix or just old school hip hop mix, whatever, on YouTube, the Sugar James track, apart from some, Kiwi lingo and Kiwi accent, would just fit in perfectly. And a lot of the time, especially Aotearoa hip hop, it's trying to be very modern. It's trying to be very like different and esoteric, and this is our point of difference. There is some like mellow type Aotearoa hip hop, like I shouted out Lucky Lance and Christoph El Truento a few weeks ago. That is another element, another strong, beautiful element of Aotearoa hip hop, but it also incorporates a very musical, jazzy sampling producer in Christoph El Truento. And that kind of goes for a lot of the other Team Dynamite, Avantdale Bowling Club, that type of stuff, like Homebrew, all that stuff is like a slightly different pocket. Whereas Sugar James is just like quintessential boom bap, golden hip hop type of style. It's very simple, it's very concise, and it's also uplifting, and it's uprising, and it's a lovely track, Just Me. So keep an eye on Sugar James, Just Me. I imagine he's got more music. This was my first time listening to Sugar James, but it's cool. And obviously the content's beautiful, the vibe's beautiful, and you just vibe on out with some Sugar James. Hopefully you vibed on out with the variety show. This week we'll be back with another episode of the Niche Cast on Thursday, which I imagine will involve a fair bit of NRL footy, because we've got team lists coming out on this Tuesday. So we'll do a bit of that and any other major Aotearoa sporting topics that we cover as well. So stay tuned for the Niche Cast on Thursday. Otherwise, kia kaha, stay beautiful. Chit-chit.